Hey everybody, I'm Lisa Young Sutton, and today I am going to talk about the Birds card. Let's start by looking at what the original instructions have to say. This is the what I call the plot, the Petit Lenormand original translations, and this is what accompanied all early decks. Right, these were our only instructions when this deck first came out. All right, so it says, the Birds card means hardships to overcome, but of short duration. Distant from the person, it means the accomplishment of a pleasant journey. So close by, it is hardships, but of short duration. Far away, you get a pleasant journey. Now, this is a card that introduces a startling and upsetting energy that creates nervousness and restlessness. It describes situations that are unstable, volatile, and disorderly. Think about things that ruffle your feathers. When you look at this card, think about your feathers being ruffled. So what do you want to ask yourself when you see this card? What's all the fuss about? What's all the chatter about? What's going to ruffle my feathers today? Because no matter what, the Birds card is going to cause a stir. This is why I chose the word aflutter for my primary vibe, because it refers to being in a nervous or excited state, and to be excited is to be reactive. Okay. Now there's a word used in the shamanic tradition of the Toltecs that perfectly describes the Birds card, and the word is metote. Here, let me write it down. Metote, there. Metote. And metote means the stress that comes from 1,000 voices chattering simultaneously. Okay, especially in your mind. But think about a crowded, noisy place where many people are talking all at the same time. Everybody has their own agenda. They all have different thoughts and feelings, and everybody has their own point of view, right? This is how I see the Birds card. It's the daily stresses of dealing with other people or sorting through all of your difficulties or your own brain chatter. Now, think about birds passing overhead to remember the idea of passing troubles. And I mean, birds have troubles, don't they? They don't know where their next worm is coming from, and everybody eats them. So let's think about the traditional method of distance. Says that the Birds card brings temporary upsets and difficulties when near, and it represents a short trip or day out when far. So from this, it's clear that to see this card in the far position, you're getting a break from your daily difficulties, distractions, or mental clutter, right? You're getting to fly the coop. You're getting let out of your cage, right? When it's far away. So the cards that appear surrounding the Birds card in a GT or that land with it in a small spread will describe where you'll experience the uproar, or will explain what's causing all the nervous chatter. Now, does it land near a life area card? If so, you can expect some minor difficulties or temporary chaos in that area of your life. Now, how did this card come to be associated with communication? Traditionally, it had no connection to communication, as I just read you the original instructions. But birds, of course, make noise, and for this reason, descriptively, we can relate it to sound, as in singing or talking. If the Birds card is relating to communication in a spread, it's more likely to be thoughtless and superficial, as in chit-chat, or it's meant to cause a reaction, as in gossip. Think of it this way. Because this card refers to frustration and agitation, then any words that might be formed while in that state are probably better left unsaid. Because superficial and short conversations and messages often lead to misunderstandings and confabulation. And what I'm describing are all words that describe and ideas that describe this card. There's another phrase you can consider, the American phrase for the birds. It refers to anything that's worthless or trivial or only of interest to gullible people. That was one of the definitions that I found. But anything that's described as being for the birds is being called trivial, right? So that fits this card as well. Now, if you are using the card for advice, what might it be? It would be like, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all temporary. Don't let all the talk unnerve you. Or get a bird's eye view of a situation before you act, right? Don't get all excited and act in haste, that kind of thing. Now, for personality traits, based on everything I just told you about this card, what type of person do you think this card describes? They would be nervous, restless, flighty, very cautious, easily distracted, like ADD types. They may also be chatty and gossipy or nosy. Nosy as in the desire to know about people or things that don't really concern us. I want to point out that when we ask descriptive questions, we may or may not use our primary vibes or core functions. Just as we can use the snake card to represent a chain or a river, or we can use the coffin card to represent a box or a closet, we can use the birds card to represent sound, or or singing, right? Or actual birds, or a couple or pair of something, like twins, right? Regardless of the number of birds pictured on the card, because it is the traditional card of a couple. And I'd like to point out the owls. I'm going to show you these decks in a minute. And you can see owls on a couple of these cards here. But somebody just asked me about what's the difference between decks, the meaning of the card between decks that use owls and birds pictured. And I said, nothing, right? It doesn't matter if the deck you're using has lovebirds or crows or hawks or owls. It's irrelevant. It still means the same thing. So I'm going to point out the Celtic Lenormand gives you 3 different cards, but I'll just tell you right now, it gives you 3 different options for the birds card, right? This is kind of like the regular birds card, then we have the owls and we have chickens here. But if you are going to use all 3 of these cards in a reading, well, then these are extra cards. Only one of them can be viewed as the traditional birds card, as your regular birds card, and then the others would have alternate meanings. And if you notice in her little white book, Chloe's little white book, she has wisdom listed as a keyword for the owls card, but not the other 2, right? And if you have oracle decks, animal-themed oracle decks that have an owls card, it always means some kind of wisdom or gaining wisdom, gaining insight, or suddenly seeing something clearly, right? But don't let that confuse you. If the deck you're using has owls on it, don't change the meaning, okay? It's still the birds card. All right. So, what does the birds card mean? It's always the same. It's startling temporary troubles. Okay, now let's look at some decks. Well, I already told you about the Celtic Lenormand. And then, you can see the Pixies. Lenormand just has the 2 birds, right? And I pulled out some of my traditional decks because you can see that the purple dragon, this is a Dundorf Lenormand, has a pair of birds. But these are both traditional decks, and they each have 3 birds on the card. Okay, the Alte Deutsch and the Stralsunder. Most of them do just have 2 birds. Now let's look at our verse decks, because everybody knows this one's my favorite by now, right? The Red Owl. Okay, so the Red Owl says, the owls hoot calls of worry and woe, but they will not create any great echo. That's saying that it will be temporary, right? A pleasant journey leaps into view when these birds are far from you. So that is sticking to the traditional meaning. And then, of course, Erna Drosbeck's other verse deck says the same thing, right? A short-lived sorrow announced the birds that are flying very near. If they are far from you, however, your travels will be full of cheer, right? So it's mentioning travel when far and temporary sorrows or worries when near. And then, of course, the poor Bluebird Lenormand deck got it wrong again. This is like the tree card. This is actually backwards. It says, birds bring a message full of cheer. No, backwards. If this card falls distant, all is not clear. No, distant is when it is positive. you know, it means you're getting away from your troubles when far, right? When distant. So just, you know, I think this is such a pretty deck, so I just ignore the verses on it. I still use it, but I hardly use verse decks, but if I do, I just ignore the verse because so many of these are backwards. Anyway, it's still a pretty deck. Okay, so that is it for today, my friends. So don't let your feathers get ruffled, and go out there and have fun playing with your cards. Bye, everybody.